World leaders are urging Israel this morning to exercise restraint after the country largely thwarted an unprecedented attack launched by Iran. The Israeli War Cabinet is set to meet next hour to discuss next steps. United Nations Secretary General António Guterres has called for de-escalation between Israel and Iran, stating neither the region nor the world can afford more war.
The Middle East is on the brink. The people of the region are confronting a real danger of a devastating, full-scale conflict. Now is the time to defuse and de-escalate. Now is the time for maximum restraint.
The UN Security Council met yesterday to discuss Iran's first ever military attack on Israel. It consisted of more than 300 drones and missiles, the vast majority intercepted and shot down before they reached Israeli soil. There is now mounting uncertainty about how Israel will respond. Israel's allies, including the United States, have urged de-escalation and emphasized the need to avoid a wider regional conflict. Chris Brown is in Tel Aviv. He's live for us in Jerusalem to lead off our coverage this morning as part of a CBC News team now on the ground to cover this. So, Chris, the main question at this point, what next? What do we know about what Israel is intending to do now?
Well, we know that the cabinet met in the aftermath of Iran's attack, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has convened a new meeting of the cabinet for later today. It's expected to take some key decisions on what Israel's response to Iran's attack over the weekend will look like. And the word today you're hearing over and over again directed at Israel from its allies and neighbors is restraint. We're hearing it from leaders in Europe and the Middle East, and also over the weekend as we just played that clip of the head of the United Nations. Some kind of military response is assured, but the scope of the action, when it will occur, how bold Israel will be, all of that is unknown, and it will determine whether this escalation with Iran remains simply tense or if it could turn even more destructive. As we saw overnight Saturday, hundreds of drones, rockets, and cruise missiles were all fired for the first time from Iran at Israel, directly hitting military targets in the southern part of this country, although not doing too much damage. They hit near a military base. The rest were shot down by Israel's air defenses along with help from its allies. Iran said this was in response to Israel crossing a so-called red line by destroying their consulate in Damascus, Syria, and killing a senior military commander, 2 senior military commanders 2 weeks ago. Now, whether the Iranian military response was a loss for Iran or a win, well, it depends on what you assess their intent was. Internally, Iran's government is claiming they proved their point by this big show of force. They had telegraphed long ahead that an attack was coming. Israel had lots of time to prepare its air defenses, and you hear Iranian voices saying they also spent a lot of money and effort to do this, upwards of $1 billion, according to some estimates, when you factor in the cost of missiles and jet fuel and so forth. Israel's position is that this was a total loss for Iran and the attack didn't cause significant damage. But really now the ball's in in Israel's court, Heather, about what happens next.
So, Chris, there are many, including António Guterres, we just heard, who are warning of the consequences of further retaliation and escalation. So, as you say, the word that we're hearing is restraint. But what specifically are we hearing from world leaders? And I'm thinking notably of the United States, too, Chris.
Well, the U.S., the President of the United States, Joe Biden, has urged Israel to basically use restraint to not do anything significant against Iran, and has said that the United States will not be a part of it. Let's hear from Lord David Cameron, the British Foreign Secretary, who was speaking this morning.
I think they're perfectly justified to think they should respond because they have been attacked. But we are urging them as friends to think with head as well as heart, to be smart as well as tough, and to recognize Iran suffered this defeat because the attack was a failure. The world can see what a malign influence they are. And I think that the right thing to do is not to escalate.
Well, Europe doesn't agree on very much these days with Russia's Vladimir Putin, but the Kremlin is also calling for restraint, as are the leaders of France and Germany. We'll see what comes out of the cabinet meeting in Israel a little later on today, Heather.
Chris, thank you very much. Live for us from Israel as we continue to cover this and wait for new developments. Chris Brown live today.